team from Delhi community. And thanks for everyone. Thanks for having me and thanks for joining. And see you tomorrow, Dhruvin.
Yeah, see you.
So we have
Yeah.
a next speaker, Michael, and I think there's some communication gap happened. So now Michael is with us. Hi, Michael. How are you doing today? Can you hear me?
Hi, everyone. I'm doing very great. Yes, I could hear you.
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
hear very well. So we want to say
Okay.
big thanks to taking. I know it's a different time zone you're working in, and I know that it's a weekend as well. But I know that we have something called. Somebody asked about MVP, and MVP do a lot of things, right? So I'm really appreciate that you take this your time and sharing goodness of what you have in this session, and I'm very excited about session because I have a lot of applications which are slower, and then you know that how you can make it faster. So please go ahead and please share your screen, please.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen shortly. I really want to thank everyone who have joined this, Power Platform Bootcamp, and I'm very excited to do this presentation. Although, just like the introduction earlier mentioned that there was a slight miscommunication because of the time zone, and because of that, I might not be able to, cover up everything that I intend to. But I want to assure you that you're definitely going to learn something very new today, but you're also going to, benefit from this session. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Just give me a second. Just 1 minute. Just a second, please. I will be sharing my screen.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time. It's okay.
Okay. Okay, great. Can we see my screen?
Yes. Now, beautiful. Thank you. Yes.
All right, great. So, um, as we all are aware, today we're talking about secrets to building lightning fast Power Apps application with best practices. But the major thing that I want you to get from this are the insights that I'm going to be sharing with us. Because over the course of the years, I have had the experience of working with different organizations, both large and small. And I've also been able to work on several projects, you know. And so the insights that I have derived from this application, I just want to share it with us. Hope that is fine. I mean, I share it with my colleagues from time to time, but I feel it's time for us to move, on to sharing it with a wider audience. My name is Michael Ojabo. I am from Nigeria, but currently I work in Muscat here with Petroleum Development of Oman. I I am a certified Microsoft trainer. I'm a certified professional. I have experience with Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and I have had a very interesting, you know, um, witnessing of how technology can transform businesses, especially in the energy sector, in the educational sector. I'm very passionate about sharing, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Okay, so today we're going to look at Power Apps Performance Optimization Guidelines. Okay, but before I move on with this presentation, I want to give a disclaimer. Unfortunately, that disclaimer is not covered in my presentation slide. But what is this disclaimer? Not every application can be built with the Power Platform. So this is a very important disclaimer that you must understand as a developer or as a newbie. Let's say you are just coming into this field and you want to experience all the beautiful things that Power Apps can do. Take note, not every application can or should be built with Power Apps. So by understanding this, you will be solving more than half of the problem that you will be facing if you have issues with performance. Then the second thing that you should also note is that within the Microsoft ecosystem, there are different tools that are available to help you build solutions. The Power Platform in itself has a lot of tools, but beyond the Power Platform, we have other technologies that are connected, like the Azure Logic app and other things. So deciding on the right tool to use, even when you come into the Microsoft space, is also very important. That you must know which tool to use. If you settle these two issues, then you are my guest right now. If you have settled the kind of technology to use, if you have settled the kind of Power Apps or Microsoft technology or solution to use, then you are my guest. And then when you are my guest, I would also take you a little bit further. You want to work on an application that can be developed with a model-driven app, then you should not spend all that time and effort doing some of the optimization tricks that I will be sharing with you in the Canvas app. Okay, so as I said earlier on, the audience for this particular talk is not necessarily for newbies or people who are just starting. So pardon me if I start making use of some words like model-driven app or Canvas app. I'm very sorry about that. This is an intermediate lecture. So, but I will quickly explain some concepts if I have the time. So your model-driven app has been designed by Microsoft to handle a lot of data lifting. And that is why it is called a model-driven app. It is an app that is built from data first. So the way Microsoft designed the model-driven app is such that it can handle large amount of data. So understanding which of the Power Apps solution to use or the kind of app to build is also very key. If there are no options left and you have to build a Canvas app, then let's move on. And I'm going to give you some insights today that would help you to build fast-paced app. These insights that I will be sharing with you, they are not necessarily contents from blogs and articles. They are contents from my experience. So everything that I will be talking about today are things that I have experienced. I probably struggled, and then I was able to find the right article or find the right YouTube video or find the right mechanism to solve the problem. Or some of them by trial and error, I was able to solve the problem. So what are these? The strategies for enhancing efficiency and speed in your app. Number one, delegation. You must understand the word delegation in the building of fast-paced Power App solution. If you do not understand delegation properly, you will, at the end of the day, struggle with other things. So what is delegation? Basically, there are tools or patterns Microsoft have created to allow you build your application. If you ignore those patterns, those functions, then you will be building apps that is repetitive, or in other words, you're performing the actions that Microsoft already want to help you perform. One of them, for example, is sorting. You see, when you are connecting your app to a gallery, a Canvas app, do you know by default, you can create certain views in your data source if you're using Dataverse, for example, that will help you handle the sorting. So you don't have to do the sorting inside your app anymore. Okay? So, but when you don't understand that, you might want to use certain functions in your app, and then you will have issues. So allowing the server side, where your data is stored, to handle some of the aggregation, some of the summarization, that is what delegation is all about. If you understand this, you will be able to build very fast-paced app, knowing how to work with delegation. Number two, optimizing data loading with Concurrent. A lot of developers, when they start working with Power Apps, they might not be aware of some of these terms. So just take note of this and see how it'll help when you build apps. So there's what we call concurrent function in the Power Platform. This function will help you to optimize your data loading, because assuming you have 5 different actions you want to perform in your app, what Power Apps will do when you when you declare those functions or those variables, is to load these actions step by step, one after the other. But sometimes these actions that you are loading, they do not depend on each other. In such a case, there's what we call concurrent function that you can use to wrap around all these 5 steps so that they happen at the same time. By doing this, you will increase the performance of your app. Number 3, limit controls. I have seen a situation where a user is building an app that has over 1,000 controls in a particular screen. Now, let me give you another disclaimer or another tip. Number 1 tip or disclaimer: if your app has too many screens, if your Canvas app has a lot of screens, then you need to know that probably all those screens does not need to be inside one app. You probably need to break that app into 2. Let me give you a typical example. You are building an app that has administrative function as well as user function. If you find out that there are so many screens in your app, and as a result, which definitely will affect the performance, it will be nice if you split this app into functional apps. So you have one of the app for the users and you have another app for the administrators. That way, you will be able to control the number of controls that are in your app or the number of screens that are in your app. Then the other thing is, if there are so many controls in a particular screen, then it is important to understand that probably you need to split that screen into 2 or 3 screens and move those controls to the other screen and use your functions to properly connect the screens together. That way, you will limit the number of controls on a particular screen. And then we talk about the use of variables and collection. You must understand how to use variables and collections within your app. I'll move on quickly to some of the performance killers in Canvas app. What are the bottlenecks that we normally face when we use Power Apps? And what are the performance issues? Number 1, cross-screen control references. Now, this is a very practical problem that I had to overcome. You see, when you build an app and you have to duplicate the screen, a lot of times, some of the controls that you are working with, they are moved on to another screen. And if you don't edit your formulas properly, you might still be referencing controls in screen A that is located in screen B. When you have this kind of issues in your app, it will affect the performance of your app. So that is one thing you should note. All right? You also need to understand inefficient data fetching. All right? When you fetch data into your app, what are the mechanisms Microsoft have put in place to help you fetch the data properly? There is a function called show columns. This function called show columns allows you to limit the number of columns that are going to be present in your app. Let me give us, for example, in most of the apps that we build, we need to use drop down for filters. You see, this your drop down, you only probably want to use just one column out of all the columns that are available. So if you want to load that data source into a collection so that you can use it in your drop down, rather than calling the name of the table directly, you can use show column to limit the number of columns that are fetched into your app. So that's another thing that is very important. Then excessive use of clear collect. When you use clear collect, it can have negative impact in your app. So you need to know how to use clear collect properly. There are times where you just need to use collect and you don't need to use clear collect, and then you can perform other actions. All right. Then we talk about lack of delegation, of course, which I've mentioned earlier on, and too many controls on the screen. What are the best practices to solving these killer performance issues? Number 1, reduce the control counts with components. So these are the best practices that you should perform in order for you to increase the performance of your app. Remember the earlier disclaimers I gave. Number one, if the technology is not right, you're going to have issues. If you did not pick the right Power Platform solution to use or Power Platform tool to use, you're going to have issues. If you have sorted these two issues, then the first thing that you need to understand as a developer is components when you are building your app. When you use components in your app, you automatically will reduce the number of screens that you need to build. You will also reduce the number of controls that you need to have in each screen. So this is very important. Either you use library level components or you use in-app components. Whichever option you use, make sure you use components in order to increase the speed of your application. Number two, use show columns to perform data fetching. So don't just get all the data. For example, I want to get I have a table for employees. Rather than writing a function to allow me get the name to allow me get the name of each staff. If I use the employee table directly, Power Apps will load all the control, all the columns into my app. But when I decide to use show columns, I can specify only the name as a column that I want or department. Then we have other things like implement lazy loading with onStart. Now, in this onStart part of the application of app development, I want to explain something very important to you. You don't need to load all your functions that you want to use in the onStart of the app. You need to use the onStart property carefully because there are some functions that you don't need to perform in the onStart of your app. You can perform them in the onVisible of each screen. By doing this, you will reduce the number of load that needs to be processed in onStart of your app. All right? By doing this, you reduce the number of load. Then the other thing that you can also do is to use what we call a loading screen. So rather than loading all the functions that you want to, what we call data caching, rather than loading all of them in the onStart of the app, you can use data caching to, you can use the loading screen to do your data caching. So from the onStart of the app, there's also what we call the start screen. From the start screen, you can decide which screen your app should go to first. By doing this, you can now direct your app to go to the loading screen first and load all your data, and then you can now navigate from that your loading screen to wherever you want to go to in your app. Then I've also explained earlier on how to use the concurrent function. Then optimizing formula logic. Sometimes you need to perform the actions that are logically sound within your app. For example, using set discount. If purchase is greater than 100, you can actually perform the calculation elsewhere and then use the set discount to pick it up. Okay? So we will look at other properties like limit your data fetching with first n. So the first n will allow you to load a particular number of records into your app before you rather than loading all the records. Then importantly, you need to use your Power Apps monitor to show you how your app is performing. I'm going to allow us to ask questions now, and then I will see if I can quickly show us one or two things based on the questions we ask. All right, are we there?
Yes, Michael. I can hear you.
Okay.
There was some disturbance a bit behind the scenes. Maybe you can rejoin the screen again. You can reshare the screen again. There's some noise behind. You can just reshare your screen, please.
Okay.
Yeah. Amazingly.
Can you-
Actually, so this is something I'm looking for, something which is like important for me to understand how things work. And there are a couple of questions about the things. So I want to understand. I mean, there's a question coming from them. So I have one questions, right? So I have an app which is which has 24 screens inside, and each screens has around 15, 16 controls,
Yeah.
headers and all. And I feel that when there's the one person which has actually working with him has not built the usable controls, like header, footers. He has not used it.
Yes.
So what I foresee is that when the application will be in production,
Yeah.
and a lot of people will be using it, the app will be become slow. So my question
Yeah.
for you, because we have each screen has around 15, 16 controls, and each number of screens are 24 screens. So what do you recommend that what the developer should do it? Is it using some reusable controls?
Okay. Thank you very much. So the question that I would ask first, I said that in my presentation. I don't know if we missed it. So when you have a lot of screen in one Canvas app, you need to ask yourself a question: are all these screens connected to each other, or you can segment the work of this screen into two? For example, a typical example is you have a screen for administrators. I mean, you have several screens for admin tasks, and then you have other screens for user tasks. It is advisable in such a case to separate the screens into two. I mean, your app, build two apps, one for admin, one for users. By doing this, you will limit the number of screens that the users have to deal with.
Okay,
All right?
I got it.
So
I got
that's
it.
one thing. Break the app into two, one for admin or one for the users. But depending on the use case, if it is not possible to separate it into two, then you need to use components to handle the controls that are within each screen so that you don't have too many controls in all within your application.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I think we have to minimize, because I think we can't split the screens, because it's a monolithic app, and I think better to use the controls, the components to use it, so it makes slightly faster.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks for your advice. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, somebody also asked some question. I think
Yes, please.
yeah, Sanjeev sir. Yeah.
Aru, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you are.
Wonderful. Michael, great conversation. Thank you very much. So would you happen to have any suggestions on data modeling, between the transaction tables and master tables? Would you recommend doing the lookups at the database layer?
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead, sir.
All right. Perfect. So one of the things that is very key when you're building your app is to ensure that you do minimal lookups within, especially within galleries, because all of these lookups can be done at the database level, at either Dataverse or SharePoint. So based on my experience, what I have done over the years is to create an app that have proper data schema. And that is using lookups to ensure that I can make reference to whatever data I need within the other tables. So you can do with Dataverse right now, you can use formula columns to create all the lookups for your app inside the Dataverse without doing it inside your Canvas app.
Right.
Because of the situation around here, I couldn't have. I would have demonstrated how I have done this. I even go as far as setting the colors. For example, an app that I created for tracking KPIs that have red, green, and blue, depending on the status of the KPI. I used formulas to generate the color dynamically and store it as a value inside Dataverse so that I don't even go into Canvas app to check the color. I already know what the color is as the app, as the data is coming into my Canvas app. One other
Right.
thing that I have done, for example, when you have choice column, it is very difficult to use this lookup in Dataverse to get the value. So you need to create what we call metadata for every table that you have. Do you know that even Microsoft, within each table, they have a lot of hidden columns that we don't
Right.
see
Right.
until we import maybe that data source to Excel or to another application. Then we see a lot of hidden tables. What are they
Right.
doing with those hidden tables? They have some processing going on within those columns to give some output. So what I do is in my application, I might have a column called status, but I can have another column called TXT status. In that column called TXT status, I will get the value from that choice of status and store it there as a text. That is not part of, you can see that it's like I'm repeating myself, but in Canvas app, rather than using the status column, I will use the TXT status because the processing is already done inside Dataverse. By doing that, you will have a lot of light columns to work with, right?
Right.
Okay.
Excellent. I mean, great, great points. The only thing I would say from a SharePoint standpoint is I believe we have a max of about 8 lookup columns, if I'm
Yeah,
not
8 lookups.
mistaken,
Yeah,
right?
and one
Yeah, SharePoint.
two are hidden actually, which means we have
Right,
limited to 6.
right,
Yeah,
exactly, right. And then
yeah,
I'm not terribly sure if those 8 actually include, for the lack of a better word, compound lookups, meaning that if I, let us say, have a master currency table in which I have country, currency, and Forex, and if I look that
yeah,
up into the transaction table and I look up, let us say, the country as the primary key,
yeah.
then I am able to bring in the currency and Forex as well,
Currency.
in
So
one
that's it.
go together. But I'm not terribly sure if those 3 actually count as 3 different lookups or it counts as one lookup because I'm just using the country as the primary key. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that
Yeah,
is one thing.
exactly.
The so sorry. So that is one clarification would be great to get. I mean, we can experiment with this. The second one is if I were to bring in the Forex as an example, along with the
Yeah,
country and currency, and if
yeah,
I
yeah,
in my transaction table have a local amount, let us say, I'm traveling to Philippines and I do a local purchase. If I want to
yeah,
convert it to the Singaporean currency, when I do the lookup, that lookup column of Forex, because it's a compound lookup, is not accessible as a calculation when I try to divide the local amount by Forex, right? It doesn't show up there. So that seems like a little bit of an issue. And if there is a workaround, would be great to know.
So what I have done, if I understand exactly the challenge or the issue, what I've done is to from the source table, I create just like I mentioned earlier on, I process whatever I need to process, right, and make it as an additional column in that source table, so that I am able to access that processed result in the transactional table.
Right.
By doing that, I avoid
In
that
this
process.
so Michael, let me stop you there. The issue is
Okay.
the local amount shows up basically as a transaction, you see. I mean, it keeps happening all the time, it's like going to the bank and having transactions, right? So it naturally
Yeah.
belongs in the transaction table.
Mhm.
However, the conversion to, let us say, your main currency, you take the local amount, divide by the currency. The currency actually sits in a master table, like in the dimension table. And then you need to bring that in order for you to convert. And in that scenario, where would you do that conversion? You would have to do it in two separate tables, isn't it?
Okay. Well, if I also got it correctly, what I would do in that case, I have the currency in my master table. I have the
local
what do you
amount.
call it? The local amount in my transaction table. There is a lookup between my transaction table and the master table. And I can access the currency from the master table using formula. Okay.
You mean a lookup? You're
Dataverse.
saying that you would
Yeah,
make it as a separate lookup, is what you're saying?
No, let's look at, assuming we're using Dataverse, for example.
Okay.
I can create a formula column in my transaction table. Since I have a lookup between the master and the transaction, I can create a lookup that will fetch the currency and add it to the transaction table as a plain text. I will do that first of all. Then I will use that plain new column that I just created from the lookup using formula column. I can now use that column in my to perform the division or whatever I need to, or conversion that I need to do. I don't know if that is clear.
I kind of understand, Michael. I think what we could do is, I suppose I can, kindly leave your whereabouts in the chat window. Would be great to connect offline, perhaps on a Teams call, and, share ideas, but a very kind of you, great session. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, Michael, and I think one of the most interesting sessions, because a lot of people build the apps, and what did they forget that after the apps has been used, I'm telling you, I've seen the experience that after the app become slower, because a lot of people are using it, and then this lookup thing, which Sanjeev said mentioned, right, has some issues, and then the main issue is that the Power App, the end user, have no visibility about how it works, because if the apps has become slower, and the submit button, which is going to Dataverse, or for that matter, get an error, and user have no visibility for that. So that is something which is I've seen from few of the vendors, and also with my own experience that. So I think your session is one of the most interesting sessions, because you gave some insights, and it will, at least I can take away and ask my vendor to use the components. I think he is not using components. I think to make it app slightly faster, and also your tips will be useful. So I have one question for you. Can you please share the slide deck as well, because it will be amazingly useful for anyone. I think people who are experienced also. I mean, like I think Sanjeev's are, and people have, and a lot of people here are MVPs as well. They will also get enlightened by your session.
Sure, I will share.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate your session. Really good. So that's it. I mean, like, good. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think some confusion happened for the time, Juice, but I think you have done an amazing job for sharing the most important topics about performance of Power App, which most people don't see only after it's an operational issue actually towards the end. But thank you for sharing. This is one of the most important topics of Power Apps in this platform. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop this session, and I will